One of the greatest skills I think that anybody can ultimately develop is what we call the ability to create self-induced states of choice. So a self-induced state of choice. First, let's start with what's the definition of a state. Now, my favorite definition comes from Jim Quick, who is the author of the book Limitless. What I love about that book is we often know that we need to learn things and that we need to be learning based. Limitless is all about how to become a super learner. And some of it, the beginning of it's kind of filler, but the ending of that book, or the middle towards the end, the last 2/3 are really good. But what he talks about is that a state is simply the snapshot of your mood. It's the mood of your mind and your body. It's the emotional experience that you're having in this moment. And in the West, we're often taught that these are things that are more like colds, that we catch them, that we don't induce them. And what I want you guys to start considering is, if especially you're familiar with this tool right here, which is the state meter, that I want you to think of this like a menu, right? Like if you go into a restaurant, you're not looking at the menu and saying to the server, hey, I'll have food today. That's not what you're doing. What you do is you say, if you're like my wife, it's like, I want the salmon, but I want it from the Northwest Pacific, and the salmon has to have been at least 1 year old. And, she's super specific about what she orders. And I want you to stop asking yourself this question: what do I need to do today? And start asking yourself, what do I intend to feel today? And all of you are probably familiar with what's called the periodic table, right? It's from like chemistry. And if you look at it, it's all the different elements of the universe. And when you think about this is like a periodic table, because emotions are simply chemical reactions. States are chemical reactions. So think of this like your own personal menu or your own personal periodic table, and that at any time you get to choose exactly how you want to experience life. Now, if we're looking at the different ways to ultimately influence a state, right? Like the state meter is ultimately our best guess at the different types of states. But then if you're looking at, well, how do I induce the states that I want or avoid the ones that I don't want? Well, that's where this really comes into play. So let me share this with you. And again, this is on our site, so if you want to reference this, you can. But I think that these are the 6 different, kind of think of them like ingredients or ways that you can induce a state or move out of a state that you don't want. And it starts with breathing, right? And write this down and remember it forever. All states follow breathing. So if you're anxious and you're experiencing anxiety, take notice of how you're breathing, or if you're breathing. A lot of times you're probably holding your breath and you don't even realize it. And there's all kinds of great tools for this. Like my personal favorite is the breath of fire. You can get that from yoga if you just Google it. But some of you have done the priming exercise that I ripped off from Tony Robbins with me, where you're taking your hands and you're going like this and you're breathing in and out of your nose. That's the breath of fire. And if you do that 30 times, what you're going to notice is your state will shift, right? And then vision isn't necessarily in this context the vision for your life, but your eyes. That again, if you're in a state like anger, frustration, states that you want to avoid, what you're typically doing is you're hard focusing. It's like you're looking through 2 straws. And the back of your eyes are the only part of the brain that are actually outside of your skull. And so like one trick with vision is to kind of sit back for a second and like imagine that you're trying to look at the entire room or the environment landscape that you're in right now. And by just softening that gaze and trying to look from left to right, you're looking out your peripherals, and then you're trying to see the ceiling and the floor. What you'll notice is that you're going to start creating this state of calm. So your vision is something that you can quickly alter and start to shift your state. movement. Now, movement, I think, kind of breaks down into three chunks. There's posture, gesture, and exercise. So posturing, there's a great book by Amy Cuddy. And if you're not a reader, go find her TED Talk. But she wrote this book that should be required reading for all people called Presence. And she talks about how the mind thinks through the body. And so like, if you want to feel a particular way, like if you want to feel really confident, you adopt the posture of a confident person. You spread your feet out a little bit, you kind of ground them into the floor. You pull your chest back, pull your shoulders back, right? And the analogy that she uses is like standing like Superman or Wonder Woman. And so posturing is a really great way to start changing your state. Or gesturing. How many of you remember the old Mo Anderson video? If you act enthusiastic, then you'll be enthusiastic. You do that shit 3 times and tell me you don't feel better. And if you don't, then you're just a freaking liar. It's awesome. So gesturing, right? And or Tony Robbins, he talks about developing your power moves. So if you've ever watched like Tiger Woods sink a putt, he always does the same thing. He's like, yes. Or Michael Jordan when he hits the winning shot. Those are power moves. And then ultimately exercise, right? Like, I don't know about any of you, but I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. This anticipatory, something's going to happen that I've got to be prepared for. Typically it happens on Sundays, right? Like the world, I always tell my wife, comes and sits on my chest. And so I have to exercise. That's my only way out of it. So developing your exercises that help you create your self-induced states of choice. Now, language has 2 different ways. There's internal and external. So one, internally, is the content of the self-talk that you're having with yourself, the conversation within your mind. And one of my favorite things to ask people is if I just took a recorder, stuck it into the side of your head and played what you were saying to yourself when you're in states of frustration, anxiety, whatever, what would that sound like? And just having them verbalize it, having them say it out loud, oftentimes brings a new level of awareness. And you've probably heard me say that often people have an inner critic, not an inner coach. But the quality of your life is the quality of the internal dialogue that's happening in your mind. And then actually saying things like one of my favorite lessons that for those of you that were in the mastermind in Austin and heard our speaker, Chad Wright, talk about is the power of your rudder, the power of the spoken word. And he talked about how this guy came to him and he wanted to become a better runner because Chad's an ultra marathoner and he coaches people on how to run. And so they were standing out there getting ready to take off. And I guess this person had never been able to run more than like 38 miles or whatever. And he thought Chad was going to be teaching him all the technical pieces of running and how to breathe and all of this. And what he did is he just made him stop after every like mile or every 10 minutes and just say 2 things that he was grateful for. And just from that, he went from like 38 miles to 58 miles in one run. The power of your rudder, the things that you're ultimately saying, what you speak, you bring about, right? Then we go to focus. Now, focus equals feeling. So if I say to you, what does the shoe on your left foot feel like right now? Your attention automatically goes to that foot. Is your shoe tight? Is it loose? Is your foot hot or is it cold? And so if focus equals feeling, the thing that controls focus are the questions that we ask ourselves. And if you want to shift your state, then start asking yourself better questions. Like, for example, what are you excited about? What are you proud of? What are you grateful for? Many of you were probably at family reunion a few years ago and heard Chris Suarez talk about what he does with his kids, which is the rose, the thorn, and the bud, right? So tell me today, what was the best part about your day? That's the rose. Tell me today, what was the hardest or most challenging part about your day? That's the thorn. And then the bud, what are you looking for? What are you looking forward to? And through those little questions, right, then he shifts and can control their focus. And focus equals feeling. One thing I've learned as a parent, oftentimes, I don't do this all the time, but instead of telling my kids I love you, I'll ask them who loves you. and I'll make them give me answers, because then they think about all the people that love them. Are you with me? So focus equals feeling. What controls focus are the questions that you ask yourself. If you want to create a self-induced state of choice, then start asking yourself better questions and do it consciously. And then ultimately your face, right? So face and if you think about, and I know this is silly, but if you're anxious or angry, go look at yourself in the mirror. Notice what that looks like. Your mind thinks through your body. What's the state that you want? If it's calm, then let go of your jaw. Your jaw are the hips of your face. Like, we hold a lot of tension in our hips, right? That's what happens in your jaw. And if your jaw is clenched and you're sitting there all uptight, and you start to just do a systems check where you relax your face muscles, loosen your gaze with your eyes, then again, you can get into a self-induced state of choice. Now, I just kind of gave you a crash course in this, and I know that there was a lot of information I threw at you. This was our latest great growth tool, and there's going to be some links and things that we add to that. So if you want more information on it, then go back to it and review it. But really, the ability to sit there and ask yourself, what do I intend to feel today? What do I intend to experience? And driving the awareness that you ultimately control, that states are not things that are like colds. You don't catch them, you produce and induce them. Man, your life is way more fun, and you are in a position of way better power.